It's 11 o'clock. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode number 4 of Facebook Fridays with John L. Scott. Our third generation owner, who's in the house today, Lennox Scott, was recently ranked number 25 in the Swanepoel 2020 Power 200 as one of the most powerful and influential leaders in residential real estate brokerage. John L. Scott was founded just under 90 years ago on the West Coast in Washington, California, Oregon, and Idaho, with 110 franchise and company-owned offices, and ranked the 15th largest franchise brokerage in the country. Our entire real estate network is collectively circled around our company's leading core value of living life as a contribution. Facebook Fridays is our opportunity to become smarter and better human beings by hearing direct from outstanding thought leaders both in and outside of the real estate industry who exemplify excellence in business, contribution to others, and innovation. This week, that outstanding person is none other than Mr. Chris Heller, past CEO of Keller Williams Real Estate. Back in 1989, Chris was named Rookie of the Year, top producing agent in San Diego, and then #1 Keller Williams associate in all of North America. Chris also has owned 3 Southern California real estate offices with over 1,100 agents, and he operates, to this day, a top-selling real estate team named the Heller Home Sellers out in Encinitas, California. So today, as Chief Real Estate Officer for OJO Labs in Austin, Texas, that's what the background here is, in homage to Chris and where he is right now in 85-degree weather, which is actually highly pleasant out in Austin. That's just like a cold day. And by the way, there's usually bats flying around in the evening, but I couldn't get that in the picture. But he is shaping cohesive relationships between real estate professionals and the OJO suite of technology. That's his role now. And Chris Heller brings deep industry and leadership expertise, having held all these influential positions. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Chris Heller to Facebook Friday with John L. Scott. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Hey, James, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you guys and gals.
Well, you know, Chris, Howard Chung and I had an interesting first meeting with you. Just a little quick background for everyone on the call today. I wanted to meet with Chris last year when I was down in California working on some expansion for John L. Scott. And while we were down there, just making sure that I'm still on the audio, correct?
Yep.
Okay. While we were down there, Chris said, you know, I have a crazy schedule, but I actually need a ride from Newport Beach area to Encinitas, where his home is. He had a condo in Newport and a home in Encinitas for his past role at mellohome. And so Howard Chung and I said, well, we'd love to do that. But just as a side note, Chris, I had rented the most inexpensive car, which is what I typically do out there. I had like a Toyota Tercel. And Howard said, there is no way I'm picking up Chris in a Toyota Tercel. So James, take me straight to the car rental place. We got to have a little more space. So Howard rented a different car just for you. And we picked you up in Newport and we took a drive out to Encinitas. So we learned so much about you and your experience at Keller Williams and going international with Keller and your team. And then also a little bit about the technology move that you've been making over the last couple of years. So it's a super great, huge opportunity for us to hear from you. I know that everyone on this call is excited to hear some of the nuances and also kind of the unique strategic decisions that you made to expand with Keller Williams, and also that team that you're growing, continue to grow. I saw a recent Facebook post where you did a video to all of your clients within the last couple of weeks. So this is a unique opportunity for our entire real estate network to hear from you about that team, and just about your experience. So could you share a little bit about the Heller home seller team and how you became top producing agent in all of San Diego? And then what was the strategy that you used to become that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, again, thanks for having me. I've always been big fans of John L. Scott and Lennox as a great leader in the industry, and one very well respected leader in the industry. So really, like I mentioned, looking forward to this. I started, this is all I've done my whole life is real estate. I was a sophomore in college when I got my license, and it's the only only job in industry and business I've known. I started very quickly. I got into real estate. I got talked into getting into it. And the broker that talked me into it took him 3 years to talk me into it. So that was the first lesson, the lesson of persistence. And he was very persistent and finally caught me at a weak moment. I said, all right, I'll give it a try. Didn't know anything, but highly driven and highly motivated. I was given a script by the manager at the office at the time, and it was a script for calling for sale by owners. And now, again, when I got in, this was back before there was any real training. It was like they just threw you in there. But I got my hands on this old script and just used it because I didn't know any better. And sold the 27 homes that year, and 24 of them were for sale by owners that I listed. At the end of that first year, realized that I cannot physically work any more than I did this year. I was working 7 days a week, early in the morning. The owner of the office was an ex-Marine. He used to get in at 6:30. I wanted to make sure I was the first one there, so I'd get in before him, and I was usually the last one there. And so I knew the only way I could do more is if I offloaded some of the stuff I was doing. So I hired an assistant. And this was in 1989, and no other agents there was about 60 agents in the office. None of them had assistants. In fact, I didn't really know any agents. I had assistants, and I was young. I was one of the younger people in the office, and I got a lot of ridicule. Like, Heller, who do you think you are, the president or something, having an assistant? And my response was, well, who are you? You spent the last 5 hours stuffing envelopes. I'm paying someone to do that so I can go out and sell more houses. Yeah. So I learned just through, I think it was common sense, the value of leverage. And as my business kept growing, I needed more people to help me. So then there was a buyer's or showing agent that was brought on, and the team kept growing. So this is our 32nd year that I've had the team. In 2010, I took a position with Keller Williams at our corporate headquarters in Austin and replaced myself as the leader of the team. I still own it. I was on a call with my managing partner before this call, going over a few things with them. We talk almost daily, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day or listing and selling of homes. And that's been that way for 10 years now. We've sold over 100 homes a year for like 26 years, and this year they should do about 150 homes, and growing that to a lot more in the next few years. So that's a little bit about how that evolved.
Well, so for our owners, one of the things that we've watched even at Keller is just the growth of teams, and then also how having team-centric offices ends up kind of assisting in the growth of offices. Could you share a little bit about the kind of do's and don'ts in that area, and ways that that's been beneficial, and points to ponder for our owners?
Yeah, so I'll speak to it from an owner or a manager or broker's perspective. I joined Keller Williams as an agent in 2004. I'd spent 16 years with Prudential California Realty, which is now Berkshire Hathaway. When I joined Keller Williams, I really started to learn. I knew inherently the value of the teams because I had created one and and saw that that's the most effective way to do more and to provide a higher level of service. Just like a doctor's office couldn't operate without the nurses and the receptionists and the insurance billers and all those. But then really understanding how that plays into the growth of an office or growth of a company. The philosophy that I learned, through my exposure to Gary and the company was that agents want to aspire to be like the top agents, right? I mean, when I was brand new, I was fortunate enough to sit across from the top agent in the office, and I was like, okay, I want to do that, and I know I can do that, and I'm going to figure out how to do that. So when you have top teams and top agents, that helps attract others. They become the bell cows, or at least in Texas, they become the bell cows. I don't know what it become in Seattle. And so part of the philosophy, part of it's just philosophy that that great talent attracts more talent. Now, to attract great talent, there has to be a good value proposition for them. Keller Williams figured out pretty early on that the value proposition was going to be two things. One was training and education. Help these teams understand how to grow and how to get to the next level, or help someone figure out how to build a team. And that was all outlined in the book that Gary had written, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. And then the second part of the value proposition was just an economic model that made sense for teams. I know when I was at Prudential, teams were almost frowned upon because we took up more space, we took up more resources. They didn't have an economic model that made sense, so the residual benefit that the company got probably wasn't what it could have been or should have been. So, the mindset and the philosophy has to be there, number one, and then number two, there has to be value that's presented to the teams to attract them, and those are the things. From a when we look at something that you all do very well, which is control market share, you can do that through sheer numbers, and you also can do it through the quality of agents, because the better agents control more of the inventory and control more of the market, and that helps the whole company, it helps everyone in the company. So there's all those benefits, and then there's the other dynamic that should be addressed in this conversation, and that is that there's an evolution, and there's always an evolution going on in industries and in our industry, and that is that it's becoming more and more difficult for a new agent to compete. When 10 or 15 years ago, or when I got in, it was sort of a level playing field. Anyone could go from new to become successful, and there weren't a lot of barriers. Now there's a lot of barriers, and some of those are financial. Because of the impact of technology and the change in consumer behavior and more people being online, you have to be able to meet people online. The teams have the resources to do that. They have the marketing power, they have the financial resources to spend marketing dollars or to buy leads, where a new agent doesn't have that ability. So we see more and more people wanting to go to a team to sometimes to start their career, but now oftentimes just to be their career. Mm-hmm. So that's another reason why teams are important, because the industry is moving in that direction.
I think that's interesting. I mean, but what you've obviously experienced is that it's sometimes short-lived. Like team affiliation might be short-lived just to give people the traction they need. Correct?
Yeah, there's it's often short-lived, and it's usually for one of two reasons. Either one is that the person was using it as a stepping stone, or two, and more commonly the case is the team and the leadership of the team hasn't learned leadership skills and management skills at a high enough level to know how to keep and retain people, right? The great brokers and managers in your organization know how to do that. And a lot of agents that became teams or became top producing agents. They did that because they developed a lot of skills and sales skills, and they have a lot of drive and motivation, but they may not have developed leadership skills at the level that they need to build a sustaining organization. And that's where the company can come in and provide a lot of value by teaching those skills to those agents and teams.
Yes. Well, so I'm going to switch gears over to Keller Williams International. So when we were in the car, you had shared just initially how you went about growing into Asia. And your strategy was simple and just highly effective, which of course normally is the case with really effective strategies. But I wanted to have you describe to the group here what you did to open the very first Keller Williams office in Asia.
Yeah, and actually it was not just Asia, it was Asia and Europe, everywhere, outside of North America. In 2008, I was asked if I'd be interested in taking a position with the company and helping them grow outside of North America. And I immediately said yes. And I didn't know what I was saying yes to. I had no clue how to do that, how I would do it. The good news is neither did anyone at the company because they hadn't done it before. So that was in 2008. I had a couple of years to prepare because we didn't actually make it official till 2010. It was about a year and a half. So during that year and a half, I did two things. Number one, I positioned my business to be able to continue to not only run, but to grow without me, knowing that I was going to be stepping out. And then the other thing I did during that year and a half was a lot of research to figure out how I was going to do this. And that research revolved around, and I didn't know anything about, although I vacationed in other countries, I didn't know anything about real estate in other countries. So I started focusing on two things. Number one, just legal and tax issues, because that was something I was going to have to figure out how we're going to do it. And that is no fun whatsoever. And then the other is how does real estate work and what's it like? So what I started doing is I knew we were a US-based company, that we were a franchise organization, and that we were going to be going into other countries. And I knew we weren't the first ones to do that. Remax and Realogy brands have been international for years. So what I started doing is calling real estate companies in other countries and simply trying to learn what it was like and what they did, and then the conversation would go into, well, how is it working being a Century 21 franchise or a Remax franchise, and what do you like and what do you wish you had that you don't have? In the way I would make the calls and get them to talk to me is I would say, I'd call a Century 21 broker in France and say, I was all over Asia and everywhere. And I would say, hey, my wife is being relocated and I'm in the real estate business. I was thinking when we move, maybe I'll get into real estate over there. Can you tell me how it works? So I'd start to learn, what it was like. And, what I came to learn is it's very similar in most countries. I mean, there's nuanced differences and there's some slightly significant differences, but for the most part, it's the same game, right? And then when I got into conversations with them about, well, why do you become a Century 21 franchise, or what do you like about that? I started to hear they were always very quick to share what they didn't like and what they were disappointed in or what they wish they were getting more in. And I'm not picking on Century 21, any brand. And what I started to hear some consistent things. And what I heard was that what they thought they were getting was not only a great brand, but all the instruction on how to really operate that brand. Really what they were saying is, we thought we were getting systems, processes, and training that would help us do more than we were doing before. And what most of them shared was they really just got an empty box. They got this big box of stuff that had some marketing stuff in it and no instructions on what to do or how to do it. That got me really excited because I knew that was one of our strengths, being able to train systems and processes and those things. So I knew that we could deliver that in a way that others hadn't. And so I used that when we started to expand. I used that to our benefit. The other thing that I learned was we decided to expand using a model of offering a master license agreement, sort of like what Starbucks does in other countries, where they award a sort of a master license agreement to someone to go build Starbucks in that country, or Kentucky Fried Chicken, or a lot of the companies expand that way. I also knew and had learned through my own experience and through observing others in our industry that leadership is absolutely critical, that the right leadership and the right talent will absolutely cause us to be successful or cause us to be a failure. Mm. So I then had to figure out who are the right leaders in the country. So as I was making these calls and then making more and more calls, I would ask questions like, well, what's the number one company there? And who are the best known people in the industry? And a lot of times, I'd find out that, ABC Realty was the number one company and the owner was one of the best known people in the industry. I knew that there would be less chance of getting that person to say, yeah, I want to convert my company to Keller Williams and go do this because they're already killing it in their market. But I also know that in any successful company, there's probably leaders in that company, maybe the second in command or the third in command, who are the ones really driving the business, that are really making it happen, that don't have any equity or ownership, and thus no real opportunity. And if I could get to those people, they may be the ones that I would want to build our brand in those countries. And that's sort of who I targeted. So I could go on and on about it. But yeah.
Well, it's fascinating to imagine that kind of first step into another country and just all the nuances of that, and then yet a lot of the similarities. So I appreciate that. Hey, I've got an agent question for you, and then an owner question for you. So on an agent question, productivity is huge on everyone's mind, obviously, especially during this time, and kind of how to scale back up for those who have slowed down. What do you see as the most important activity and or mindset, of course, for agents and brokers during this time, especially as we come out of COVID at some point?
So mindset in and of itself is hands down the most important thing. Even in good times, in any time, mindset is. I don't know if I heard this somewhere or just had this thought. I probably heard it somewhere because most of the thoughts aren't my thoughts. And that is that, really 90% of our success is based on our thoughts and our mindset. And the other 10% is just doing the activities that we know need to be done. Mm-hmm. If you think about a top listing agent, the difference between them and an agent who's struggling, a lot of it is mindset. Yes, there's skills that they've developed and other things, but it's the mindset that allowed them and caused them to develop those skills. So the mindset is absolutely critical. In these times, it's amplified. It's the importance of it. We can't look at things at any other way than an opportunity. Like when this hit, it hit everyone, right? And it came out of left field, and no one was anticipating it, and no one is unprecedented. And we've never experienced an event like this that had more uncertainty than this event. And the natural thing to do with uncertainty is to be fearful and have concerns and do all those human things that we do. The key is minimizing the amount of time that spend thinking those things, and then quickly focus to where's the opportunity?
Mhm.
Because with everything, there's an opportunity on the other side, right? The flip side of that coin is opportunity. And so initially for my team, with our company, we did things very quickly. We were very decisive in the decisions that we made. Um, Decisions we made around cutting expenses, decisions we made around what we were going to focus on, narrowing our focus, cutting out things that weren't critical, and then going deep on those things. So being decisive was one thing. For an agent, and from my team in San Diego, the conversations revolved around, okay, right now we need to be the voice of reason for people. We need to be the calming voice for people, and we need to be connecting with people like we've never connected before.
Right.
So what we immediately started doing was calling everyone in our database. Now we do that on a regular basis anyways, but that was, I think, a lot of times sort of going through the motions and calling for referrals and giving them updates. And now it was, hey, we just want to call and check in and see how you're doing. And what the team discovered immediately, like within the first day of making calls, was like, wow, people were like, they were answering the phone more than they've ever answered the phone. They were willing to engage more than they've ever engaged, and they were appreciative of the call. And so that fueled the team to even want to do it more and more. And then shortly after that, they started to see results of it. Like people saying, well, actually, we were thinking about selling, and you think this is a good time. And that, and it created opportunities. So, my business in San Diego took a little bit of a dip, but we've taken little bits of dips before. So really it's just kept going. But it's because of the actions that we take. So at all times, it's important for agents to be doing two things. One is creating new relationships, getting in communication with new people, building new relationships, adding people to their database, and then deepening the relationships that they have. This is the opportunity to just scale that up like they never have before. Because we know what happens. There's a certain amount of buyers and sellers that absolutely will put the brakes on whatever plans they have. And then there's the other group that are going to move because they need to. We want to be there for the ones that are going to move because they need to. And as importantly, we want to be there for the ones that put the brakes on. So when they take the brakes off, that we're the ones they remember. We're the ones that are in their, that are on top of mind because we stayed in contact, or we were in contact with them more than anyone else. And then you benefit from that coming out the other side.
I love that. Build new relationships and then deepen the ones that you have. Powerful. And obviously, the mindset hands down is number one. The activities follow the mindset. Those are that I just hope everyone was able to kind of grab that and take note of that, because that's such a valuable, and yet you would think, oh well, that's kind of common sense, and yet sometimes we fixate on the like stuffing envelopes part, right? So I don't even know if you remember saying this, but in a recent interview you said there is a finite amount of space up there, meaning in your head. And so you said, I'm going to make sure that I'm putting in more positive than negative. And I thought that was just, that kind of follows a line with kind of like following the news versus working on the mindset, right? So,
I only remember, I don't remember the interview. I remember saying that because I've had that belief for
you've been thinking it.
ever. When I got into real estate, I knew I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the most experienced. I wasn't the most talented. I knew I wasn't any of those things. And I also know I'm not the smartest person. So I've always operated like, okay, there's only so much room up here. What am I going to fill it with? Just like, this water bottle, there's only so much that I can put in there. So I've always been very mindful of the power of my mindset, because I knew my mindset would be the thing that would impact my ability to create discipline and build the muscle of discipline in the areas I need to build it to go at a high level. So, being very mindful of what I read, what I listen to, who I hang out with, who I spend time with, what I'm watching, I stopped looking at news and when there were newspapers a long time ago and watching the news, and people go, well, how do you know what's going on? Trust me, you'll know what's going on. You hear about what's going on. You don't need to be watching the noise there. And we also know that I at a very early age, I figured out, okay, well, here's what a half hour of news looks like. Bad story, bad story, bad story, weather, sports, and then a feel-good story for 2 minutes at the end. Why is that? Because people like the drama. People, that's the news that sells. And that's the stuff that makes you feel bad, that makes you focus on how bad things are. And it's hard to operate. You think of a professional athlete, a Seattle Mariner going up to the plate, if baseball is happening now. And, if their mindset is on the fact that they struck out last time they were up versus focusing on what they need to do, they wouldn't be successful. And we have to make sure that we are really guarded on what we let in. And it's just not what you let in, because the default is negative. The default around us news-wise is negative. So you also have to be very mindful about putting positive things in. So I obsess about what I read and what I listen to and what I'm watching, and using every moment that I can, whether it's while I'm working out or when I was an agent driving between appointments, always listening to, now I'm going to date myself, motivational tapes and
Tony Robbins
and Mike Ferry and everything to keep my mindset as sharp as possible.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron or Nick, do we have any questions out there?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for Chris. First one has to do with teams. You had kind of mentioned teams earlier. It says, what are the most important things to consider when contemplating forming a team?
I think the most important thing, the first thing to consider is the thought should be not, I'm going to build a team for the sake of having a team. It's, I'm going to figure out how to generate more business so that I have to build a team to take care of that business. I see a lot of agents make the mistake of saying, okay, I'm doing 10 deals a year. I'm going to build a team and do 100 deals a year. Now, there are some agents that have done that successfully, but they're few and far between. And so they build this team and get all these people, and then, it's not sustainable and they can't pay them and there's not opportunities and people leave. What you want to do is say, okay, what do I need to do to keep doing more business? Where do I need leverage? And then hire or bring on people to fill those positions. So have the focus be on building your business, and then building the team is just a natural byproduct of doing that. In other words, after my first year, I knew that one thing I had to get rid of, because it took a lot of time, was phones and paperwork. So the first assistant I hired was, hey, you take all the phone calls, you handle all the paperwork, so I can just be lead generating and doing presentations and negotiating. And then I realized, okay, showing property sure took a lot of time. And I really like to focus on listings anyway. So then I hired a showing assistant. And it wasn't, it was all to give me more time then to go out and be able to do more business. Now, a lot of agents get fearful about hiring someone or bringing someone on because they view it as a expense. And my mindset was always, it's an investment. Now, if I hired someone and then used that extra time to go play golf or go to the beach, then yes, that's an expense. But if I hired someone and then used that extra time to spend more time on generating business or doing more presenting, then I knew I was going to, that person I was hiring was an investment that I was making that was going to yield more dividends. So I would say, to answer your question again, focus on doing more business and then building the team around it to handle it. That becomes a great foundation and something that is sustainable. And then using, I think the other thing that's super important is hiring the right people and the right fit. if you're going to build a team, you want team players. There's lots of examples in sports where franchises will bring in all-stars to their team. I can't remember the year it was. I'm a big Lakers fan, and again, I'm going to date myself, but it was the year that the Lakers brought in an ex-Seattle Supersonic, Gary Payton, Moses Malone, and someone else. They arguably had the most talent in the NBA, right? They had like 5 all-stars in their starting team. They made it to the finals, but they got beat by the Philadelphia 76ers that had almost, very few stars, but played together as a team much better than the Lakers did. So you want to hire the right people that are good team players and that are good at roles. My attitude was always with anyone I was going to hire is whatever role I was going to hire them in, they had to be as good or better than me at that role, and preferably better than me. So if they were going to be doing administrative work, it wasn't hard for me to find someone better than me at that because I didn't like to do it, but I was going to hire someone who's really good at that.
Chris, I have a question. Is there a certain profile of a great team leader in these teams? Or I'm sure anybody can be a team leader, but is there a certain profile that really shows up?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Alex. I think the answer is yes. I think when we look at leaders in general, what makes a great leader versus a mediocre or poor leader, whether it's a leader of a team or a leader of an office or a leader of a company, there's a few characteristics that we consistently see. One of them is that they walk the talk, right? So leading by example, I think is super important. You cannot, maybe even more so today than ever before, you have to be able to walk the talk and lead by example. The other key characteristics are someone who has high integrity and is transparent and authentic. We're seeing all sorts of issues in our country today because we aren't seeing those type of things. So if we look at the great leaders of a team, of any business, of any corporation, of any country or city or state, they have those type of characteristics. They are authentic, they are transparent, they are humble. When they make mistakes, they own them. They're responsible. They aren't victims. They don't use victim language. Those are the characteristics of the great team leaders. Now, I think there's another thing that I don't know if I call a great characteristic, but I think it's something we often see, and that is that they are really clear on their vision and where they're going, and they are very focused on that, and they also have the drive or the desire to get there and to have the team want to come along with them. There's days, there's weeks, there's months, there's times, there's years, there's events that make it hard on everyone. But the leaders that have that clear vision and that plan of where they're going to go, they aren't going to be deterred by those days or weeks or events that get in the way.
Well, thanks, Chris. Aaron, out in the Facebook Live group, do you have a question?
Not so far. If anyone on Facebook has any questions, feel free to write it in the comments, and I'll go ahead and ask.
Right. Well, I'm gonna. Yes.
I have another. Do you have time for another question?
Yeah, give me a sec. I want to get the
no
question
problem.
in for our owners. So for our owners, and I know you have an opinion on this. I've been watching your Facebook posts. Will there be a new norm? Or is it different? Is it a better norm or a different norm for our industry? And how would you describe that as our owners and managers describe that to their agent teams?
Yeah, so, all right, I think you put about 3 questions into one. So if I don't answer them all.
You could answer one and we'd be
okay.
Good.
So, yeah, I believe, and it seems weird to even say a new norm, because if it's new, then it's not a norm. But will things be different? Absolutely. I think things are always different anyways, right? Things are always changing and evolving. I think this event will fast forward, speed up, amplify, whatever adjective we want to use, will cause things to happen even faster. Whether it's good or bad or positive or negative, we get to choose. We get to decide because we get to design it. We know things are going to be differently because we're all thinking about things differently, and we're also starting to see behavior and people behave differently. Now, some of that behavior could be temporary and probably is temporary, but some of it either will stick or will continue to go down whatever path it's going down. So some examples. I have never worked from home before. I've been here for whatever it's been, 8 weeks. I think March 9th is when we started.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know, in the past decade, I don't know that I've ever spent this much time in one city because I've been traveling a lot. And I've never worked from home, and I never wanted to work from home. And now I'm going, you know what, I could do this. And I know there's a lot of people out there having the same thoughts. So, our agents and going to be more comfortable not having an office or not going into the office than ever before. Some absolutely. Now there's others that, that thrive in that environment and that need that dynamic and everything else. So, one of the things we need to look at is, what are our offices going to look like? Physically, how big are they going to be? How big do they need to be? What are we going to do to be able to provide agents with all the things we want to provide them with if they are working remotely even more than they had in the past? So, those type of things. Consumers, as a consumer, consumers overall now are doing more online than they've ever done before. You have people doing things online that they hadn't done before. You have people ordering their groceries online and having them delivered that had never done that before. You have people that are getting more comfortable doing things digitally than they had before. And we were already doing a lot digitally as a group, as a set of consumers. So does that mean now that they're more comfortable doing more and more things, virtually and online? I don't know how it doesn't, and so what does that mean for how we market properties, for how we show properties, for how we interact with sellers? So what we emphasize as being important, there's those type of things. So I think there's a lot of things that are going to be different, and we're not done, right? This isn't, I don't know how long this is going to go on, and we don't know what next winter is going to look like, and nor do we have any control over that, which is another point I just want to bring up because I've been asked this a lot lately, about, the future and what should we be doing. There's only two things we can control. And the only two things we can control are our thoughts and our choices, or choices, actions, choices, they're related. So doesn't mean that we don't think about the future or start to plan for it. I think I posted something recently this week, and I reposted an article that I read that I really struck a chord with me. And it's about leadership and strategy. And the point I made was that we have to be decisive about the choices we make right now, and we have to be really strategic about where we're going or what we're going to be building in the future and what we want that to look like. Because this has been what's happening right now is like the great equalizer. This didn't happen to me or you. It's happening to everyone. And so we have an opportunity now to say, okay, we get to create what we want the future to look like. If we could snap our fingers and create however we want, what would we do? Putting off to the side for the sake of the conversation, what constraints we have and what, legacy systems and processes we have. But if we could do it now, what would that look like? And then, okay, now, given that we do have all these constraints, what would we need to do different to get to that new future?
I love that, thoughts and choices. It's really in our court. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Nick, for the question. Hey, I want to get into your OJO Labs time, which has been about a year, correct? Or a little less?
Yeah, actually, I joined the company full-time in July of last year, but I was introduced to them while I was still at Keller Williams. And then when I left, I became an early investor, became an advisor for them, then became a board member. And then last July, I joined them full-time. It's a startup technology company here in Austin. We have about 250 employees, 125 of which are here in Austin, a group in Minneapolis, and then a group on the island of St. Lucia. And what OJO is doing is creating technology to help consumers make better decisions. And we use artificial and human intelligence to do that. Consumers are able to interact with OJO through SMS, through text messages, where they can ask questions and view properties. And then OJO learns about the consumer and their preferences, and then is able to show them properties that meet their preferences. For a consumer, they can get questions answered that they can't really get answered anywhere other than by talking to an agent. And a lot of times, depending on where they are in their buy or sell cycle, they're not ready to engage with me as an agent, but they have a question. If they go to Zillow or my website, they can see a lot of information, but they can't get answers to questions like, hey, is there a room, or is there a view from the room upstairs, or is the backyard completely private or semi-private, or there's things that they just wouldn't know. The listing agent or the seller would know. OJO learns this information and then is able to answer questions. If we get asked a question that the machine doesn't know, it gets fired off to what we call an AI trainer who is able to research and can answer that consumer and give them their answer. What ends up happening is we essentially help consumers get those questions answered when they want to be connected to a service professional, or whether it's a real estate agent or a lender, then we're able to make those introductions.
So are you seeing accelerated adoption of tech and tools either during COVID or kind of hints at that post-COVID? And how do you see that as helping our industry or maybe even hurting it?
So whether it helps or hurt, again, I think we get to decide that as an industry. And we're going to decide that based on what we adopt, how we adopt it, and how we leverage the technology that's there to benefit our consumers and ourselves. What we saw at OJO was a couple of things. People absolutely are spending more time online, and probably everyone on this Zoom and on Facebook we're all online right now. So we see consumers spending more time. We see people looking at homes more, people asking questions. Doesn't mean that they're doing things, but I think there's also, I think some things are going to happen out of this. I think because people are spending more times in their home than they've ever spent before, they're starting to realize that maybe it's not the right fit for them, or they have needs that they didn't realize they had, or because they may be spending more time, they're going to need things. So I think we have people that are going, you know what, I need a yard, or I need more space, or I need to have an office. And I think people are starting to look at those things. The other things that we saw was people that were shopping for homes before this hit. Many of them put it on hold. They said, yeah, we're going to wait, not the right time. We don't know what's going to happen. We also saw people that were going online after this hit that are transacting, and those are people that just are moving anyways. And there's always a percentage of people that no matter what's happening in the world are going to move. Some of them by choice, some by by necessity. You know, they've had a life event, and you know they need to make a move. So you know, we've seen the quantity of leads go down, but the people that are out there are high intent people. Was there another question?
No, you got it. So
I have a question.
Lennox.
Yeah, Chris, I'm not sure on this one, but did you go to Landmark?
Yes.
Was how did that impact your positive mindset and the whole seminar? And I'm sure that's one of many, but
Yeah. Yeah, that was in 1997. It made a huge impact on me and on my mindset and how I looked at things. And there was a lot of ahas and a lot of transformation that came out of that. I'll give you one of them, which that probably a lot of people can relate to. I am introverted by nature, and growing up, and back then I was extremely introverted, like painfully shy. I would be Mike Ferry would ask me to be on a panel at his superstar retreat, and my heart would be beating so hard that I would look down to see if you could see my suit moving, you know, before I went up there. And I'd be up there and my mind and my heart racing so fast that sometimes I couldn't even hear the questions that were being asked. I remember I did the Landmark Forum, and that August I was out there and I was sitting in the front row, gonna be on a panel next, and I realized that I was completely calm. And I was almost looking around like, hey, is everyone seeing this? Like I had no, my fear, my nerves, I think were gone. And from that point on, you know, you could stick me in front of a group to talk. And I mean, if it's something I know about, it's a lot easier. But, you know, that was one instant profound change in me. Now I'm still introverted and I'm not the most sociable person, but the fear of speaking in front of people is not something that I have to deal with. It just caused me to look at things a lot differently.
I took a real chance on asking you about Landmark because I didn't know what your experience was. I just want to share with the group that it's one of the most impactful personal achievement seminars I've ever gone through. And I've gone through several times, and I assumed you had gone through Landmark, and I took a chance and asked.
Yeah.
It's in every major city in the United States and around the world.
Yeah.
Landmark education.
Yeah, and most people that have gone through it would echo what you just said about it. Everyone has a different experience, but everyone has an impactful one, or at least most people do.
Yep.
There was you made me think of something else too, though. I remember this was like in the 80s when I was really young. I was in a seminar. I don't know how I got there. I don't know why I was there. I remember I was at this hotel in La Jolla, and it was an author, speaker, Dr. Dennis Waitley. And he had written a book, and you can still get it on Amazon because I recently bought it because I just wanted to read it again because it's been so many years, called The Psychology of Winning. And it's something that I understood more after I did Landmark. But what he said in that seminar that I remember vividly, he said, hey, I'm going to write up 10 two-letter words on this chalkboard. And I was sitting in the front row, and I was like 20 or 21. And he wrote up, if it is to be, it is up to me. And at that moment, what I heard was, I'm responsible. I am responsible for the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm responsible for the outcomes. I'm responsible for, you know, what I achieve, what I don't achieve. And I actually probably took that too far for a big part of my life of taking on responsibility for things I wasn't responsible for too. but when I did the Landmark Forum, I actually started to understand the meaning of responsibility in a whole new way.
Thank you for that. Well, Chris, we only have a few more minutes, but I have a couple fun questions for you. So who is your hero?
That's a hard question for me. I don't have a person that I would say is my hero. There's a lot of people. I've had a lot of mentors. There's a lot of people I learn from. I am a constant. I have a huge appetite to learn and to grow and to get better. And so there's a lot of people that have achieved great things that are pieces of them are a hero to me. I mean, for a real estate company to be in business for 90 years and to be as successful as you are, the leadership, Lennox and the other leadership, those are heroes to me in that way. So anyways, I'm sort of blanking out.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but that's pretty powerful in itself. I mean, I think you seek inspiration in format, so that's awesome. Hey, favorite sports team?
Give me a sport, narrow it down a little bit.
Well, I think we know the basketball one, but so okay. Football.
Football's hard because as a kid, I grew up a Rams fan. They moved away. So then I became a Chargers fan. And then the Chargers left San Diego. Yeah. And so I'm now sort of thinking, I'm sort of gravitating back to a Rams fan.
So you're really not, you're just not loyal? Is that what I'm
No, they weren't loyal. They left me. So I'm a Lakers, Dodgers, LA Kings, Rams. I'll root for the Chargers, but I can't say they're my favorite anymore. I was a season ticket holder for years, and then when they left San Diego, that was a tough one to swallow.
Well, speaking of San Diego, which is really God's country in so many ways, do you miss the beach while living in Austin?
Yeah, I was, before this happened, I was going back regularly and I'm fortunate because I really feel at home in both places. Like if I fly into San Diego, I have that feeling it's home. And when I fly back into Austin, I have that same feeling. And I think that's really unique. So I'm really comfortable in both. You can't beat the weather in San Diego. You can't be walking on the beach. So if I had to forever be sentenced to one place, it'd probably be Encinitas. But I'm fine here too.
Well, I mean, you'll be there for a little bit longer, and I'm sure you'll get on back to Encinitas. So. Well, how can people dial into you more or find more resources?
I'm glad you brought that up. If for anyone listening, if I can help in any way, shape, or form, don't hesitate to reach out. You can message me on Facebook. You can send me an email at cheller at OJO Labs, OJO Labs, LAPS. Message me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat or help with anything that I can.
Well, thanks, Chris. On behalf of the entire John L. Scott family, Lennox Scott, and our Facebook Friday team, we thank you for your time and sharing with us your valuable insights and seasoned advice. A special thank you to each of you who joined us today on Facebook Live, here on Zoom, our moderators, Nick and Aaron. And please join us next week, same time, same place, where we will be interviewing Paul Boomsma. He's the CEO and president of leading real estate companies of the world. This is a community of 550 firms, 4,600 offices, and 135,000 agents. It's the largest community out there And we are a part of it within John L. Scott and a founding member. So I'm excited to have Paul on the call with us. So for questions about John L. Scott or John L. Scott franchise opportunities, don't hesitate to reach out to me at jamescolburn@johnlscott.com. And then we wish each of you a wonderful weekend in a profitable and prosperous and purpose-driven real estate business. And as we play our role in living our life as a contribution. So thank you, Chris, on behalf of our entire organization for spending this time with us. While you're sheltering in place, I know I could probably catch you more easily this week than say 8 weeks from now. So I appreciate your time, and thanks for going back and forth on these questions and making sure that it was right. So I appreciate and also the questions from the gallery and Lennox and allowing us to do this. So thank you, Chris.
Hey, my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Well,
Thanks,
everyone,
Chris.
thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you same time, same place next week at 11 a.m. on Friday.